And welcome to another episode of 50 Shades and Grey, where today I'm joined by Asa Sanderson from the Process, which is his mental well-being site. So check out Asa on there. Welcome, Asa. Thank you for joining me, buddy.
Hi there, Elliot. Thanks. Great to see you again. It's been a long time.
It has. So myself and Asa, we met on the show that I was part of a couple of years ago now, My Mum, Your Dad. And Asa came in and did a group session, Asa, that was right, wasn't it?
That's it. Yeah, I think it was the first one that you guys had. Quite early on in the show. Did a group session with you guys just to try and get you talking a little bit more, opening up a little bit more, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So, tell us about very quickly. Give us a background of yourself and what you do, and about your practice as well.
Sure, yeah. First and foremost, I'm a psychotherapist. My company focuses on mental well-being. Sometimes we'll go into workplaces, deliver kind of corporate workshops on mental well-being. Sometimes we'll offer retreats, to people. So we'll go away and do kind of outdoor adventure activities combined with group psychotherapy. And one of the workshops I'm actually delivering is with someone else from My Mum, Your Dad, Monique, who I think you're still in touch with, friends with.
Yeah, Monique. Yeah.
So we're actually delivering a website on recovery from narcissistic abuse together. So yeah, that's quite exciting, and that's on the horizon. So lots going on, and yeah, just really happy to be here today to talk through some of the things that are important to your listeners, and see if we can shed some light on them from our point of view.
Yeah, we've spoke before we come on air, obviously. So what we're going to talk about today is I think it's really important that guys between them talk as well. So this would be a bit of an insight into two guys' opinion of relationships and their versions of being single, and how two guys actually view it. Because I think for a lot of women, they find that a really interesting aspect of an insight into how guys actually think about things, because they find us very strange creatures to understand, I think, sometimes. So the first thing we're going to start with is, and we spoke about this before, to do with the relationships. It's just about being single, because you said a lot of your clients, they come in and it's around relationships and coming out of, like you said, abusive relationships. And I've spoke about this a lot on the podcast, that I do think being single, in terms of just being happy on your own, even if you're in a relationship, you're still a single person, and it's really important to have that happiness. I don't know if you've come across that in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I see quite a lot is people come to me and they say, I want a relationship, I want a girlfriend, or I want a boyfriend, whatever it might be. But they haven't really done much work on themselves. They haven't really got their foundation into such a good place. They haven't really got the hobbies and interests, the lifestyle, these kind of things. And so it becomes quite difficult to meet someone when you haven't really got that much going on yourself. So I find that people in this situation tend to be seeking a partner to really fill a void within them, rather than kind of fill that void themselves and then meet somebody to complement their kind of lifestyle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, completely, totally. I think that, for me, it is about sitting inside your own head and being comfortable in your own head, which I think a lot of people struggle with. I speak to a lot of friends, and they are like, I couldn't be on my own. I just can't be on my own. And they're open about it. Where actually, for me personally, I do quite like just being on my own sometimes. And I think there's a comfort in being on your own if you know you've got someone, and there's an unease about being on your own when you think, I'm on my own. Am I ever going to meet anyone again? But that may happen. That may be the case for a lot of people. But I think it's really important that you find a happiness of, other things to make you happy, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. But see, I think you're probably in the minority for kind of being comfortable on your own and being quite content. You seem quite comfortable in your own company, which I think is fantastic. But it might be quite interesting for people listening to hear just a little bit more about that. Like, how do you fill your time when you're kind of just not in a relationship and on your own? Because I personally, and watch some TV for a while, but quite quickly I find myself kind of getting a little bit bored of that. I do need some stimulation. So how do you do it?
I think for me, I've always been very independent anyway. Growing up, I think my circumstances of growing up is you had to do things for yourself, otherwise that they weren't going to get done. So with that, you become very self reliant, and you build a lot of. For me, I feel like I'm quite a resilient person. I've managed to sort of get through things in my life on my own. So I've learned to deal with things through my job. What I do notice now with parents growing up is we're so keen to protect our kids, we're not actually exposing them anymore to any issues for them to sort of deal with this resilience. Even on a basic level, as soon as they find things hard, parents now are like, they're finding it too hard. This is too stressful for them. But to some degree, there needs to be a controlled amount of sort of resilience that they face in order to build it. Otherwise, they're never going to build resilience to anything. And I think in relationships, especially, you do need to be very resilient, because you are guaranteed that some of your relationships aren't going to work. You are going to be brokenhearted at certain times. You're going to be faced with a situation of giving someone else a broken heart at certain times. These are things that you more than likely will face, and you're going to have to deal with them. So you need that resilience. So I think for me, I built up that growing up quite quickly from a child. So I was always quite comfortable with that. And again, like you say about interest, I've always played my biggest, longest relationship and most successful relationship has probably been with football. It's always been there for me. It's been a massive outlet for me. It's been a massive part of my life. At times it's been fantastic. At times it's been heartbreaking, but it's always there. And a lot of my life has been around that. So I've always had that going on in my life. And outside of that, I've always had loads of other hobbies as well. Going to the gym, I'm always doing stuff on the house. So my time is always spent and can be spent doing other things to take me away from sitting in front of the TV thinking I'm on my own. So the times that I do sit in front of the TV is actually quite nice for me. It's like, a plane, getting on a plane now is brilliant, because I think, do you know what? It's 3 hours of sitting down doing nothing
Yeah,
without
yeah.
having anything to do. So I can just sit and relax.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like you've got quite a lot going on. Day to day, you're really busy, whether it be with the sport, with the kind of other projects you've got going on, and so on. So you have a very fulfilled life. So when you meet someone, potential romantic partner or whatever it might be, do you find that they like that, or that actually is a bit of a barrier for you, and kind of a bit of an issue in the early stages of dating?
Probably found both, to be honest, though. So I think there's people that I've met that found that very challenging and think that I'm not giving them any time because I'm not making time, and they're probably right. I don't think they've been wrong in that, but I think it is about meeting someone that reflects your own values as well, and that fits in with your life. And I think one person's needy is another person's sort of comfort. Some people want to be called 10 times a day. Other people, it will drive them nuts. I mean, I think most guys would find that quite annoying. If they're being called constantly all day, like, what you're doing. I'm not doing anything. I spoke to you like 20 minutes ago. I haven't done anything in the last 20 minutes. I don't know what to tell you, but I think other people really enjoy that, and that they enjoy knowing that they've got someone there as soon as they need them, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
every turn and at every minute. For me, that's not, I quite, I'm quite attracted to independent women anyway. If I find that someone's independent and they do things for themselves, and, for me, that's an attractive trait, where I think to some guys that they don't actually like that. They want to feel like they're in control of absolutely everything.
yeah, yeah. No, I totally get that. When you talk about the values of potential partner or partner, whatever it might be, what kind of things are really important to you? What kind of values do you look for and think, yeah, that's what I want? Or in contrast, one way you think, oh, you know what, that's not for me.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to see the things that are not for you rather than like a list of things that, that's what I'm looking for. I think if you're going out with a shopping list of, things that you want in a person, you're probably going to come up short most of the time because, people will have one or two of those things maybe, but it also depends how they are with those things. I quite like assertive people, but at the same time, there is a thin line between assertive and being rude to people. So I think it all depends upon the person. And I think that's why it's probably, especially as you get older, it's very difficult to meet people because you know so many things that you don't want in people. And as soon as you see them, you'll tend to shut down straight away because you think that's not what I want. I've seen that a million times before. I know that I don't like that, and that's no one's fault. It's just a process of how it is really.
Yeah, so
How do you find that?
maybe when you're dating in your 20s, for example, you're a bit more open and a bit more flexible because you don't know what you don't know, right? So, oh, okay, we'll give this a try, see how it goes, and so on. Whereas, sounds like now that you've had a bit more experience and you're a bit further down the line, you're quite quick at picking up. Oh, there's that thing. I don't like that. I want to avoid that, and that's not for me, and so on. So you've really refined what it is you're looking for in another person, and to fit in with your life. Is that right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's probably a question for you, Asa, as well. Sort of, you've just turned into your 40s now, and I don't know if you're in your relationship or if you're single, what your current status is at the moment. But as a therapist that is quite experienced in all the things that you're looking for, do you find it any easier?
That's a really good question. I'm not used to when people ask me questions because I'm normally the one asking.
Well, that's kind of the idea of the
um,
podcast.
yeah, no, fair enough. So yeah, do I? Yeah, for me, it's interesting because in my line of work, you kind of get used to identifying, certain things quite quickly, right? And seeing traits in people and so on. But for me, the things that really stand out as being very important in dating and relationships, whether it be for myself or for clients or whatever, I think there can be lifestyle things, there can be hobbies and interests and so on, whatever it might be. But the two things that I find to be really kind of cornerstones of a successful relationship are one, the values of you, as you've mentioned, and is there some common ground on the values. So for me personally, I'm thinking, are they a genuinely kind person? Are they quite loving and caring and considerate? Are they able to compromise? These kind of things are important to me. Now, for somebody else, say for a client, for you, for whoever, that might not be important. It might be, are they career driven? Do they put money first? So on, so on. But that's what's important to me. And so I think when you're dating, some common ground in terms of the values is really important. And the other thing, and I don't hear it being spoken about very often, but for me personally, I always look for the mindset. I think the mindset is so important. Now, for me, and there's a book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. It's really good, actually. Anyway, but she talks about a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Now, I think two people with a very fixed mindset can probably be together and have a very happy relationship because they're very fixed and they don't want to change and they want to, follow that path, and that's all well and good. For me personally, I have a growth mindset, and I'm always kind of looking to evolve and looking to develop and looking to grow. And so when I'm looking for a partner, if I'm looking for a partner, that's quite an important trait that I'm thinking, okay, have they got that kind of mindset? Because if they have a fixed mindset and I have a growth mindset, it doesn't matter how attractive they might be or how great their values are and so on and so on. Eventually there's going to come a time where I'm thinking, well, I'm trying to grow and go off in this direction, and you just want to stay here. So, yeah, they're the two things for me: the values and the mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the mindset actually, because for me, I think it's that thing of, if I'm thinking about doing, if I've got a crazy idea, and I do get a lot of them that I'm going to sort of try and pursue, if I like someone that will tell me one reason why you should do it, as opposed to those people that will give you three reasons why you shouldn't do it. Or that's a stupid idea because what if this happens and what if that happens? I like the people that go, yeah, give it a go. See where it goes. So I think you're right. I think that those traits come across in many different things as well. But do you find now, sort of like, are you a much different person in like you're turning 40 as you were to turning 30?
Goodness me, Elliot. I mean, if you've known me in my 20s, honestly, you probably wouldn't have spoken to me. I mean, I was very different, very, very different. But, I think that's a really, I think most people, they kind of reach a point where they have a choice, don't they? You can either carry on making the same mistakes you've always made and getting what you've always got, or you can take a look at things and think, something's got to change here. Something's got to change, right? And for me personally, I wouldn't say I was winning at life. So yeah, I had to make a change. And for me, I actually went over and lived in Asia for a few years. And that was kind of like a bit of a career break, really, where I got a chance to just take a look at things, where I was going wrong, what I was doing wrong, and where I wanted to be. And something that I do a lot with clients actually is kind of painting a picture, not literally, but creating a vision of what the next 5 years is going to look like. What you want that the next 5 years to look like, what you want the next 10 years to look like. It doesn't have to be too detailed. It can just be a vague outline. But without that vision, really, you're just living day to day and making the same mistakes day to day. So yeah, I think that was a really important part for me. I think it helps clients to really picture what it is they're trying to achieve. And then once you've got that, so for me, for example, nice family home, couple of children, a couple of dogs, whatever it might be, kind of flexible working lifestyle, these kind of things. Well, if that's what I want, then I have to be very intentional about how I go about achieving that, because it's not just going to come to me. Life's really, really difficult, and you have to work really, really hard to get a healthy, happy, loving relationship, to get a couple of kids with, a good kind of family home. It's really tough. So for me, yeah, you have to be quite intentional about those things.
I think it's important actually with talking about dating, and I don't know if you found this with your clients, that I speak to people through the podcast and through the Instagram accounts as well, that they're always saying, I keep meeting the same guys. Why do I keep meeting the same guys, like the same way? And do you find there are reasons for that in these people? Because I've sort of think, well, you keep finding them or you keep treating them the same way and they end up being the same guy, not because it's the same guy you're choosing, because you're the same person that's going to make this guy. So to give you an example, if sort of I found that, I keep meeting guys that cheat on me. Why do I keep meeting guys that cheat on me? Where when you get to know the person more, you think, but you don't give anyone any time. And if you don't give people time, they will find other people that will fill the void for them. And so it's not about these other guys cheating on you. It's about you're not giving people what they want as well. Have you found that in your practice?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting one, isn't it? And I think there's so much to it. I mean, that thing about keep meeting the same kind of guys, you think, okay, well, does that trace back to childhood? What was the father figure like? Because ultimately, subconsciously, we're going to kind of map what we experience from mum and dad, in terms of like looking at, ultimately they're your initial role models for a male and a female, right? So then when you grow up, you're kind of seeing, potential partners and thinking, well, does that fit the template of a man? Does that fit the template of a woman? And so on, based on kind of what our early childhood experience kind of showed us. So sometimes there's things in that. So for example, if the dad was very promiscuous, then potentially, going to be looking at subconsciously maybe you're kind of meeting guys that fit that template, which I'm trying to kind of put quite a lot of psychological theory into about 2 sentences. But
Yeah.
anyway, so there's that. But then there's also the part that we mentioned earlier about kind of the independence, right? So not many people, especially nowadays, are really comfortable just in their own company, right? So they're trying to kind of, it's nice to find love. It's nice to find a romantic partner and intimacy. So a lot of the time, we're in a bit of a hurry to do that. And by being in a bit of a hurry, sometimes we make mistakes, right? Because ultimately, if you're kind of starved of that for a little while and then something comes along, all of a sudden the brain floods with dopamine, we get very excited, a little bit of adrenaline, and maybe you start to miss some of those red flags, which otherwise you would have kind of gone, that's a
Yeah.
red flag, that's a red flag, that's a red flag. So there's that. But then something that I think is really important and probably not spoken about enough is emotional regulation. So, when that's happening, we're feeling can be overwhelming, can be quite overcome with emotions and so on. Now, if we have the tools in place to regulate those emotions, we can go, oh, that thing's happening. That thing where I get all excited because I've just met someone, that's happening again, isn't it? I need to regulate that emotion. I need to just calm things down. I need to take a little bit of time, and put some boundaries in place and so on. But a lot of the time we don't do that. We go, this is exciting. They're really hot. I want to experience that. Let's go. And then before you know, it's like, oh, it's another one of them. So yeah, that's the main part of what I would say on that.
Yeah, I did actually. I think I've been more capable of that in my dating history as well. I know, like you say about the dopamine rush, that I was very guilty of just getting way too excited, way too early, and then I'd do that thing where you'd sort of go out and think, oh, I'm just going to play it cool, and then before you know it, you're going, I think I love you. It's like, oh, after 20 minutes,
Yeah, 20 minutes. Yeah,
20 minutes into the day, I think I'm in love with you.
we've all been there. We've all been there.
And a lot of the time, what then happened is the other person gets really excited as well, and then sort of 2 or 3 months later, I think, yeah, I don't think I'm in love, and I think that brings us nicely on to, I think there's a big thing of like being in love and falling in love. And I think I never ever recognized that. I was always, yeah, I'm in love, and it is just that excitement of starting to fall for someone because you start to like them. You start to think about them in the morning because you'll send them a message and then you'll wonder what they're doing in the daytime. And then it's all that excitement that you think, I'm in love, when actually, I don't know how long it takes to be fully in love with a person, or if you are ever fully in love with a person, or if you're always constantly falling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good point. And isn't it funny, if you look at two people in that kind of honeymoon period where, you're feeling like you're falling in love or maybe are falling in love versus, the last few months of a relationship. And it's like in those first few months, it's like, I can compromise on that. And yeah, I'll do that. And we can go there and yeah, whatever, whatever it might be. People are very flexible, aren't they, to meet the other person's needs and to kind of fit in, right? And then in the last couple of months, it's like, as the relationship starts to break down, and like you say, you get over that initial thing, and then you kind of start to think, oh, maybe this isn't the right person. You start to see, oh, hold on, I need someone with a growth mindset. You're obviously a very fixed mindset, or I need someone who's loving and caring and so on. And you're obviously, more career driven and these kind of things, which, each to their own. But then you start to go, yeah, I'm not going to compromise on anything. I'm just, this is me. You take it or leave it, right? That's kind of how it goes, isn't it?
I think, yeah, I think it is. It's that whole thing about sort of, women talk about it with guys. Oh, they sort of keep treating you mean to keep you keen. And I often think, yeah, if they're treating you mean, they just don't care. It really is that. But I also find, like, with the whole falling in love thing, it's that as sort of as humans, we don't recognize when someone may love us, and because of their actions, we almost need to hear it. And someone could be really, really nice to us, but we're constantly thinking, well, I want you to tell me. And you think, but they could tell you, it doesn't mean anything. Just because they tell you they love you, it doesn't mean they do. It's how they treat you, how they make you feel. They're the most important things. But I think as people, we love to hear it, and I don't know why we do so much when a lot of the time you probably don't need to hear it, but you just need to feel it more, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I wonder if it comes down to feeling safe, whether it be emotionally safe or whatever, psychologically safe. Because when someone says it to you, like I love you or I want to be with you, whatever it might be, I think that's very reassuring, isn't it? And I think people quite generally, they, like to hear that. They like to know that they are very much wanted and so on. Also, something that stands out to me in a lot of my work is that, you know, and you see this with social media and validation and kind of all these kind of things, and to an extent dating, and some people kind of, are promiscuous, sleep around, things like that, in order for that reassurance, right? I call it kind of being in search of okayness, right? We all want to know that we're okay. Other people think we're okay, right? And so, if you think about kind of dating and relationships and that thing you said about someone telling you, I love you or whatever, it's just that kind of feeling of they love me. I must be okay. That's good, isn't it? Because I feel okay. And does that resonate at all?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the one thing about telling sort of someone that you love them, I think sometimes you want to let them know how you feel. So I think it's not only about the other person hearing it; it's about you want to put your emotion across to this other person, and sort of say like this is how I feel about you, just so I'm really invested into this. But at the same time, it can go the other way where things don't work out. That the first thing you hear is, "But you told me you love me," and, and it's like,
Okay,
but
okay.
yeah, I did, but things have changed. It's like, well, how are things? And I've been on both sides, and sort of had people say that to me. Where you think, well, look, last week you told me you love me. You're like, how comes it's all over now? And I've also been the one saying that the week before, and then the week later, and then
Yeah,
that's when you think, I was never actually in love in the first place. It was just the process of there. And then
yeah.
when I do look back over my life now, of the people that I've dated and the amount of times that I've said it, I do wonder sort of how often I've actually been in love.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because sounds like in those initial stages where of the dating process, where you've said or someone said to you, "Oh, I love you," and so on. Sounds like you feel like maybe you've said that a bit too soon. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think you know I think we're brought up on this ideology of what makes us as people. What makes us as people is like you grow up, you meet someone, you have kids, and that's what you're doing. You are defined by you're almost defined by your relationship with someone else. It's like have you got a man, have you got a girlfriend? And I think if we change the mindset to thinking, first of all, are you happy? Are you a person that's happy? And then that should be our starting point, no matter what, because if someone else comes into your life and goes out of it, you're always left with yourself. The one thing that you can rely on in life is you're always going to have yourself. You're never escaping that. So that's got to be the most important relationship to start with is you, because you're always going to have that relationship.
Do you know, Elliot, that's such an important thing is the relationship with yourself, and I think that's why you seem to be quite happy on your own, in your own company and so on, is because you seem to have quite a good relationship with yourself. But actually, I think that really circles back around to where we started with clients coming to me or people going to date looking for something in someone else when really they're not in the best place themselves, and I always try to think of relationships and dating as, that's really the cherry on the top of the cake, it's not the cake itself. And so if people work on themselves, and we'll come back to what that really means in a moment, but if they can work on themselves and get themselves to being in a really solid position, then number one, if you don't meet someone, probably not going to matter so much because you're having a busy, fulfilled
Yeah.
lifestyle, happy lifestyle anyway. And if you do meet someone, they're probably going to be really awesome because they'd have to be in order to pull you away from that great lifestyle that you're having, right? And actually, in contrast to that, if you don't have any of those things, then really what kind of person are you going to be attracting? Someone who's probably not got a lot going on themselves.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's with the whole sort of, finding yourself. I think for me, once you've experienced being lonely in a relationship, that's the worst place to be. And I think once you've experienced that, you do have a different mindset of thinking, do you know what? At least if I'm on my own, I know I'm always going to be happy, because being unhappy in a relationship is the loneliest place in the world. Because you're constantly with this person that there's no happiness with, and that's hard to get out of, and it causes a lot of stress. And I think once you've experienced that in a relationship, you then know that no matter what happens after that point, you'll always be happier on your own than unhappy in a relationship. And unhappy relationships can be very difficult to get out of as well.
Absolutely. I think that's a podcast, in itself really, is how to navigate your way out of a relationship that is not quite right, because that can be very, very difficult. And actually, going back to what you said earlier about kind of saying, I love you too soon and that kind of thing, quite often people get themselves into a relationship too quickly, and then it can take years to navigate their way, and that can be quite messy, can't it? So, but yeah, I definitely relate to that.
And so going on to the last thing, Asa, that we wanted to talk about, that we spoke about again before, was this whole thing with the dating apps. Now, we've both spoke, and we've both had experience of the dating apps. I haven't done them, same as you, for quite a long time, but I don't think they've changed an awful amount. But I get a lot of messages about it and about how to cope with them and what to do. And they've completely changed how dating is now, because they are with a much busier lifestyle, which is why I started using them years ago. I just wasn't finding time to go out. And also a lot of my friends that they're all married and or they've got partners. There's not always people to go out with. So, if you're not doing something about it, you're not going to meet anyone anyway.
100%.
It was interesting. I was thinking the other day that if you was to put into context how dating apps work and how they would work in previous years before dating apps. So if a girl was talking to a guy in a bar and, they were getting on and they were just chatting, no one would go near them. As another guy, you'd look over and think she's quite nice, but you wouldn't go over there and go, so how you doing, while another guy's talking to her. And then you wouldn't get another guy going over going, oh, there's two guys over there talking to that girl, I'm going to go and say hello to her. So then but that is how dating apps work now, because people are able to hold conversations, because no one knows what's going on, with three or four people at the same time, and be distracted by so many things, because, all of a sudden it's, they're talking to two guys, and then Chris comes along. Oh, Chris looks really fit. Chris is really nice. He does hang gliding in his spare time. So, I'm going to chat to Chris. And now I'm not going to talk to Dave because I can't have 5 conversations going on. I mean, have you found this a lot from your clients when they sort of say about meeting people?
Yeah, there's always a bloody Chris, isn't there? It's always. But no, it's it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think years ago, probably 20 years ago now, these websites and apps, they were designed with the premise that they were going to make dating easier. And actually, going back to the days of websites, there was search criteria and filters, right? So, you could specify almost down to the height and the weight and all these kind of things of the person. Whereas now, and so in some ways that was actually quite helpful, right? Because you could really narrow it down. Oh yeah, they're my type, and I'm going to date them. Now it's this massive sea of people and very few filters. I think the filters normally are something like age and location, right, on certain
Yeah.
apps. Um, and so it's a massive sea. You can burn up so much time, energy, and money, going to these dates, right? Which to meet someone who I've been on dates where within 10 seconds I've known this hasn't got a future, right? Because it's
Yeah.
just not a match, just not attracted, whatever. But so that in its that's a bit of a tricky situation. But then also coming back to the thing you were saying about, the multiple speaking to multiple people. So like I mentioned, in the chat we had before, I personally actually started to just speak to one person at a time, and I would match somebody and see that conversation through and that connection through from the start to the finish. And if it didn't work out, then that's okay, we move on. But until it didn't work out, I wouldn't I wouldn't have another kind of communication with someone on the app. Now, that might seem really strange in today's kind of dating world, but for me, it just meant that I wasn't burning up so much time kind of going on dates. I wasn't burning up so much kind of emotional energy and mental stress in talking to multiple different people. And it meant that the conversations I was having were much more kind of wholesome and nourishing, and I just got a lot more out of doing it that way.
So, but as a guy, did it bother you knowing that the person that you were just going, I'm talking to, I presume that you told the person this as well, did you?
Yeah. So I would tell them, and sometimes they would think that was really quite odd. They think they weren't comfortable with it. Like, what do you mean you're not talking to anyone else? Go and talk to other people. Like, this is too intense. Which I get. It's the
You're
way it
too
is.
needy.
Yeah, too needy. Yeah, you you're too you're too sensible about dating. Go and date loads of people. That's a much better idea. But yeah, so I did, and sometimes people thought, oh, that's a bit unusual, and other times people thought, oh, that's great. You're actually just into getting to know me. It's like, yeah, but so go on.
Did it? But then did it? Did you ever want that back from them? Did you ever sort of kind of say
Yeah.
sort of or not?
No, not at all. I mean, in reality, I think that's completely unrealistic, isn't it? It was just a decision that I'd made
Yeah.
to because otherwise, you've got three people you're chatting to on an app, three people you're chatting to on Instagram, three people you're chatting to on WhatsApp, and you're trying to do a job and live a life at the same time. It's just exhausting. Whereas, to just meet one person at a time is plenty. That's quite nice, isn't it? To just get to know someone and that's it.
Well, I'd like to get your opinion on something, Asa. Actually, so I met a guy a couple of years ago now. I think it was at a wedding, and he was single as well. And at the time, I was single, and we were chatting about dating apps. And he was quite a wealthy guy, and he said to me, "So what I do." He said, for this, because I was saying, no, it's so boring. And I said, because you have the same conversation with people. He said, I have a girl that does it for me. And I was like, what do you mean? So he said, I pay her by the hour. So what she does, she makes a spreadsheet. She does all the pre-conversation. She gets to the part of the day. He said, I've given her exactly what I want. And he said, when it comes to date, she basically gives me sort of like a file on the person that I'm meeting, and I go and meet them. He said, I've got all this information. He said, because I haven't got the time to do it. He said, it just bores me. And I was thinking at the time, that's an awful idea. But the more I thought about it, I did start to think, well, it's kind of genius in some ways, because he's got a girl talking to a girl. So the girl knows what the other girls want to hear, and they're only going to meet him anyway. No one's lying to anyone, kind of, but I didn't know morally whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. I didn't know what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, wow, it's certainly a controversial one, isn't it? It's an interesting way of doing things. I mean, yeah, I can't say that I would kind of go down that route, but you can see the logic, can't you? You can see the logic because it's a minefield out there, isn't it? So, you think if it worked for him, then yeah,
Well,
why not?
I think the girl that he used has got quite a few clients, that she does this for.
Wow.
So she's just like the middleman in
Yeah.
the middle of the middle act between the two people that are doing it. But I don't
Yeah.
know if the guy ever met people and said, "Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. Up until this point, someone else has been talking to you on my behalf. So, does it really matter if they get to the point where they both like each other?" And that, I don't know. I never saw him again, so I don't know how it worked out.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one to hear what your listeners think about that, wouldn't it? To see how the women would feel about that. I don't know.
But if they turned up and met the guy and everything that they'd heard, I suppose it's no different from if they had a friend who said to them, "Listen, I've got a great guy for you. He's
Mhm.
this, he's this, he's
Yeah,
this, and this. Do you want to meet him?" And they'd go, "Yeah, okay then." I don't think it'd be any different, but I don't know. Next time I bump into him, if I ever do again,
yeah,
I'll let
yeah,
you know and find out how that goes. Well, listen, I
yeah.
say thank you so much for joining me on 50 Shades of Grey today. I'll put all your details on here, and people can go on and follow you and see the work that you do. Having met you in person, you're a beautiful person from inside and out, especially out. You're gorgeous. I can sit and look at you all evening. Yeah, thank you. So great luck with Monique and the work that you're doing with her, and make sure you post stuff, and we'll forward it for you as well.
Elliot, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and yeah, let's stay in touch and hopefully do it again sometime. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Asa. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for following 50 Shades of Grey. Make sure you subscribe and leave your comments below. Take care. Bye bye.